Hello and welcome to another day in paradise. The African diaspora living in America have been by far the most influential of African ethnicities on this planet, followed closely by my home country of Jamaica. And it seems as though that the trend will continue with the Americans of African heritage as they return back to the African continent, as it will be their experiences that will be highly sought after by the African diasporans, not just in America, but across the entire diaspora. I just finished watching a video on the rise of American African diasporans, YouTubers, who are using their respective platforms to share their experiences of moving back to the African continent. And of course, this has been all spurred on by the events that have happened recently. Well, I would say that these events have been publicized recently, but the killing of unarmed African American men and women and children have been happening in the United States since its inception. So it's been happening since America existed. So it's only been highly publicized for the last 10 years, I would say, and this George Floyd murder, which happened right in front of the cameras, well, that garnered so much attention that many African Americans have made plans to move back to the continent. So they are looking more specifically for other African Americans who have already made the move, and they are looking for their experiences. So, you know, I can understand why African Americans are having so much success when it comes to building their YouTube platforms and building their businesses, because a lot of them are building businesses around their following, their followers on YouTube and on Instagram. So they're making money from it, which is really good, because we're going to need to have people on the ground who we can trust. I'm not sure how many people have done business in Africa, but finding those people that have integrity is very difficult in the business world. A lot of them are just ruthless businessmen. You got a lot of ruthless businessmen, and they are there to make money. They don't care about what happened to you in America or whatever. So you got to be careful. And these repats have given hope to a lot of African Americans who need somebody over there that they can trust. But anyway, what about us? What about us, the African diasporans in Europe? What will we take to Africa when we return? What will be the benefits of being a Nergopean? Well, there are many benefits of being a Nergopean. The first benefit, I would say, is if you are from the Caribbean, then it is really easy, actually, far more easier than it would be if you're an African American, to find out your heritage, to find out which tribe you came from. You could go back and see which tribe you came from, because especially places like the Dutch Antilles, they were very, what's the word? Oh, it's a beautiful animal in the tree. They were very singular when it came to which tribes went to those islands. So if you go to sort of the Dutch Antilles, or you go to, say, Jamaica, my country, Jamaica, there are only sort of 2 or 3 tribes that went there. So if you're a black African diasporan and you were of Jamaican origin, you can pretty much find it pretty easy to find out where you came from. Whereas if you're an African American, there was a lot more admixture in the genetics. So it spares us as Caribbeans the expense of having to go through finding out who we are by doing a genetic test, which can be wholly inaccurate at times anyway. So that's one perk of being an African diaspora, an Nergopean, I should say. But you also have African continentals who also moved in the beginning primarily to Europe because it was easier for them to get there because of colonialism. So a lot of them had colonial ties, just like the Jamaicans had colonial ties. The African American population didn't have any colonial ties. They were African Americans. You know, they were brought there by many different colonies, and they were kept there by their European oppressors. So it's a lot more harder for them. It was a lot more harder for them to have that tie to Africa. They were almost severed completely, which isolated them big time. It was not good for them. So anyway, that is one plus of being a Nergopean. The next one is location. So if you were like me, you've been brought up in Europe and raised in Europe, you would have had many African friends. Not African American, but African, like from Nigeria, from Ghana, from West Africa, where most of the Anglophile Africans that were colonized came from West Africa. You would have had 2, 3, 4 friends who were from there. So we had ties. We had stronger ties, and as opposed to what we had in America. Now, in America, it's only been recent that the African diasporans in America have been embracing their African heritage. I can remember 20 years ago, I was in New York. True story. I was in New York and I was speaking to a guy, and he said to me, that I asked him where he was from. He said, I'm an African American. No, he said he was an Afro-American. Yeah, I'm an Afro-American. I said, okay, you're African. And he looked at me like he was so offended that I said that. He said, no, I am not African. I am Afro-American. And he made the point. And it was just this one guy that said this to me, but this was the general feeling. African Americans isolated themselves and had this air of superiority over their continentals because they genuinely believed everything that was told to them in the media by the white Americans, which is so sad. They were so gullible in that sort of sense because they just accepted that Africans were living in bushes and that we were, that they were poorly educated and that they were living in villages with no electricity, and that couldn't have been further from the truth, could it? And we know that now. We have the power of the internet, so we have the most powerful computers on the planet that we could put in our pocket. So in 2020, ignorance is a choice, right? So anyway, it's sort of because we learnt about these different cultures throughout the Caribbean and throughout Europe as well, because Europe's a small continent and we've got many different nationalities in that continent, and then you've got lots of different diasporans from all over the world who also come to live in Europe who kept strong ties with their ethnicities. So if you go to America and you find yourself, say, a Southeast Asian who'd been living in America, who married a white American man, they will go out their way to say that they are American. I am an American now. They will do everything in their power to not even speak their native tongue. It's so sad. It's pathetic, actually, in a way. It's pathetic to see how quickly people will drop their own heritage in order to identify with another. Very sad. But I can't remember my point now. The point I'm trying to make is that we as British Jamaicans living in England, we had a multitude of different ethnicities who we could turn to and look to, who could join together, you know, and we learnt from that. So when I go to Africa, it's not I'm not stepping into a completely different world. Whereas if you're an African American, there is a very good chance you may not have even have left the United States ever in your entire life. That's scary. So it's going to be difficult. You're going to have more of a culture clash when you do go to Africa, unless you do the smart thing and listen to... unless you do the smart thing and educate yourself on the culture that you're moving to. Another thing is location. Now, Africa, West Africa itself, is pretty close to the United Kingdom, and there have been historically many ways of getting from the UK and especially France back to West Africa. The airlines like British Airways and Air France cater for West Africa. You can fly direct from London to places like Accra and Lagos, and even Dakar. You can fly direct. So that is one massive plus. So it's easy for me, if I'm living in Birmingham, to drive my car, catch a train to Heathrow Airport, jump on a flight, and then I can be in Accra in 4 hours, you know. I'll say 5 hours, sorry. In 5 hours, in one single leap. Whereas if you're an African American, you're living in Mississippi, it's likely you'll have to take 2, possibly even more flights to get to the same destination. So it's much easier for us location-wise to just pop into Africa and pop back out. We can do that. We can run our lives in a way in which we can live in more than one country. I've done this before, and it's very easy to do so. The flights aren't very cheap, admittedly, especially with Air France, but with Turkish Airlines, especially if you book in advance, those flights are really good, and they're well catered for. So location is definitely something that we have a positive, something we have going for us. Nergopeans also have the benefit of being able to travel throughout the United States and be treated differently as well than your African American, which is not good in a way. It benefits us, I suppose, but you know, if I get pulled over by a cop and I'm speaking like this to them, they are either going to... You'll see the fright or fight response inside their eyes. I've been here before because I've lived in the United States, and I've seen the way they react to me. They don't know where to put me. You can see them stay. You know how they are. You know how they are. They try and do everything in their power to try and figure out how to deal with you. So I suppose my British accent, and if you're a Frenchman, a French African diasporan, if you have a French accent, it's going to get you places where if you're an African American, you'd probably struggle to get out of certain situations. So last but not least is women. I didn't really want to talk about this, but I'm going to anyway. So I find it not so difficult to talk to women talking like this. I would like to say that I communicate pretty well. I articulate myself well, or I can do. I haven't been in this video though, by the way. I know that, but in times I can do. And being able to communicate is very important. And if you're an African American, it's likely you've mostly only communicated with other African Americans. Even if you've lived in New York, you know, I've lived in New York, and I've seen African Americans who have never spoken to a Jewish person, who have never spoken to a Russian. There are many. They call it the melting pot, but the melting pot. They call New York the melting pot, but it's not a real melting pot. Everybody's fragmented, and they live in their own communities, and they never veer out of those communities. It's quite sad, actually. But that's the way New York was built. It was built that way, and it's just stayed the same. Whereas I was brought up in a community with many different ethnicities living around me, and that was kind of the norm as a British Jamaican. Albeit I did start living. I think the second house we ever moved to in central England, we had a Nigerian doctor that was living sort of just around the way from us. Lovely guy as well. So it's good to be a Nergopean for the fact that it's likely you're going to have better communication skills than your average African American who has come out of Mississippi. Dare I say the name Art Cathy. So yeah, those are some of the perks of being a Nergopean. I just wanted to clear that up with you. It's not all doom and gloom for us, but I'm really looking forward to forging close ties with our African American brothers and sisters there on the African continent, and I'm really looking forward to just wallowing in blackness. I really can't wait. So anyway, that's it from me. I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you when I see you. Ta-ra a bit.